Hey guys, welcome to the quarantine classroom. Today we are going to look at some patterns for factoring. So if you look at this, your assignment for today is going to be really similar to this. So I wanted to give you some examples of what you're going to expect. This is going to seem pretty easy in comparison to some of the stuff that we were working on Monday and Tuesday with factoring out the GCF. But it's going to tie in together with what we were working on with GCF to factor out some quadratics, which we'll be working on the next couple of days. So we've got to get these patterns for factoring down so we'll understand what to do later this week when we do some factoring quadratics. So I took some questions. Again, this is similar to what your assignment on Canvas is going to look like for this. So you've got a column of numbers, and the title of the column is if the product of two numbers is, and you've got each one of those, and their sum is, and you have each one of those, then we need to come up with the two numbers. So for the first one, it says if the product of two numbers is 5. So you need to think of what two numbers do you multiply together to get positive 5. And that's really just 1 times 5. 1 times 5 is the only thing that gives you 5 multiplying wise. So then you need to see, okay, does 1 plus 5 give you 6? And it does. So the answer to the two numbers are 1 and 5. Now on your assignment in Canvas, you can write 1 and 5. You can put 1 comma 5. It doesn't matter to me. So for the second one, we need to come up with two numbers that have a product of 6 and a sum of 5. Well, there's actually two sets of factors that will give you 6. You have 1 times 6 and you have 2 times 3. They both equal 6 when you multiply them, but you need to decide which two of these numbers also has a sum of 5. 1 times 6 doesn't have a sum of 5. So the two factors that we are working with in this one are 2 and 3. 2 plus 3 is 5, and 2 times 3 is 6. So again, you're trying to brainstorm and come up with two numbers that give you a sum of this and a product, or product of this and a sum of that. So for 14, we can do 1 times 14, and we can do 2 times 7. They both give you a sum of 14, but only one of those sets gives you a product of 9, a sum of 9, and that would be 2 and 7. 2 times 7 is 14, 2 plus 7 is 9, so we have 2 and 9. For 21, you want to think of two numbers that you can multiply together to get 21 and add together to get 10. Sorry, 2 and 7. 2 and 7. Okay, multiply together to give you 21, add together to give you 10. So we have 1 times 21, and then we also have 3 times 7. Both of those give you a product of 21, but only 3 times 7 gives you a sum of 10. So that's going to be 3 and 7. And then the last one, where we have all positive numbers, a sum of 20, product of 24, and a sum of 11. So we've got a few things that give us a product of 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. But only one of those sets is going to also add to give you 11, and that would be 3 times 8. So 3 times 8 gives you 24, and 3 plus 8 gives you 11. So we're going to be coming up with 3 and 8. Now, when you have the negative numbers, you also need to think about the rules of multiplying negative numbers. So the product is negative 15, but the sum is positive 2. So when you think about numbers, two numbers that give you a product of a negative number, that means one has to be positive and one has to be negative. So we could have positive 1 times negative 15. That's going to give you negative 15. You could have positive 3 times negative 5. That gives you negative 15. So I want you to think about, obviously, 1 and 15 in no way, shape, or form is going to get me to 2. But when you add 3 and negative 5 together, that gives you a negative 2. So you got to think about, well, that doesn't work either. So what could I multiply together to give me negative 15, but still add and give me a positive 2? If you change the signs of this and made it negative 3 and positive 5, that gives you a negative 15. And if you add those together, that's going to give you a positive 2. So your two numbers this time are negative 3 and positive 5. So you have to really think about, it's got to give you a negative when you multiply it, but it has to give you a positive when you add it, okay? So for negative 14, I've got negative 14 and I have positive 13. So here's some things I'm going to think about. 1 times negative 14 and 2 times negative 7. There's no way I can combine 2 and 7 together, positive, negative in any way, and get 13. But I can combine 1 and 14 together, positive or negative, to get 13. The way I have it written, if you did 1 minus 14 or 1 plus negative 14, that would be negative 13. I need it to be positive, so you need to think about how you can switch those signs around. So now if I have negative 1 times 14, that's negative 14. If I have negative 1 plus 14, that gives me positive 13. So we have negative 1 and 14. Okay, this time I have a negative 24 and a negative 2. So you got to come up with a number. Think about two numbers that would multiply to give you 24 and add in some way to give you a 2. So if we go back and look at this, 1 and 24, that's never going to give me a 2. 2 and 12, that's never going to give me a 2. 3 and 8, I can do 4 and 6. So I want you to think about, would it be negative 4 and positive 6 or positive 4 and negative 6? I know that's going to get me somehow to a 2 when I add them together, but it's got to be the negative version. So it's not going to be this version of it. If you do positive 4 times negative 6, that gives you negative 24. And if you add positive 4 and negative 6 together, you get negative 2. So it would be positive 4 and negative 6. Okay, so these two, we're kind of switching gears again because I want you to look at the product. The products of these are positive, but the sum of both of these are negative. So I want you to think about what combination of numbers are you going to multiply together and get a positive and add together and get a negative? And the answer to that is they have to be both negatives, okay? So if you have a combination of numbers, you can multiply together to get 12 and add together to get some kind of 7. The two numbers you need to think about are 4 and 3. And they both have to be negative, because negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Negative 4 plus negative 3 is going to be negative 7. So they both have to be negative, negative 4 and negative 3. And then the same thing for 24. You need to think about two numbers you can multiply together to give you 24 and add together to get negative 10. So since this is positive and this is negative, that tells me they both have to be negative. So if you go through all those factors that give you 24, the two combination of numbers are going to be negative 6 and negative 4. Sorry, I had to think about it for a second. Negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24. Negative 6 plus negative 4 is negative 10. Okay. So when you go in there and put these answers in Canvas, it doesn't matter to me if you have 5 and 1 or 1 and 5. I'm going to go through them together or myself and see, as long as you have the right numbers listed. I don't care which one you have first. Please watch your positives and negatives because I will be particular about you grading, or when I grade those, okay? Come in on Zoom if you have any questions. If you are watching this for Wednesday, April 15th, I'm going to have to do our Zoom session at 2 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock. I have a faculty meeting at 11 o'clock, so I'm going to move our Zoom session to 2 o'clock. So if you have questions about this or anything else that we've been working on, come into the Zoom session at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.